Hi, my name is Ann Spihar. I'm here to help give you valuable information on how to give a helpful Quality Matters recommendation. Writing a good, helpful recommendation cannot be overstated. Yet understanding the structure and content of the instructor's course can be daunting and insurmountable. And then, reading and following the Quality Matters rubric and mapping it against the course can be challenging. The amount of information is significant. How do you put it all together into a helpful recommendation? How do you begin? What should be your approach? Well, I'm here to provide you with a few tips that can help ease your concerns. I'm going to provide 3 easy-to-follow steps that will help guide you to successful recommendations. These 3 steps are going to be focusing on the standards and the annotations associated with the standards, and second, relying on course evidence, and finally, on the kind of characteristics that are important when you write up your helpful recommendations. All of this, I promise you, will lead you to successful and helpful recommendations. First, let's start with the standard. This, of course, is extremely important and number 1. Begin with a specific review standard in the Quality Matters rubric. You must read this and be very familiar with it. Secondly, reviewers should read the annotations for each standard. The standards themselves are deliberately succinct, whereas the annotations include more detailed information about the standards, directions for reviewers on what to look for, and examples to help interpret the standards. The annotations thoroughly explain the standards, and reviewers must refer to the annotations to ensure that they are interpreting each standard correctly rather than relying on their own opinions as to what the standards might mean. The standards and annotations are not meant to be personal opinions, but rather are the authority in this particular review. Second, it's important to rely on course evidence. Reviewers look at the course to find evidence that the course meets the standard at an 85% level or higher. Reviewers should always cite specific examples from the course, including location, quotes, and details. And finally, we're going to talk about the characteristics that are required of reviewers in order to ensure that they deliver helpful and meaningful recommendations. Reviewers should ensure that the following characteristics that we're going to discuss on the next few slides, are present in each recommendation. And those characteristics are being constructive, being specific, measurable, being sensitive, and having a balanced approach. Let's go through each one of those. Let's start with being constructive. While it's important to have a business hat on, when we're trying to provide a helpful recommendation, it's wise to keep the construction hat on. Let me give you an example. Here's something that you might say to an instructor whose course you're evaluating. The Start Here button on the course homepage was a great idea for linking students to startup information, as specified in the annotation for Standard 1.1. Instructions make clear how to get started and where to find various course components. When I read the information it contained, I still couldn't tell exactly how to begin the course. It might be very helpful to include a prominent link and directions at the end of the Start Here section about what students should do next to actually begin the first lesson of the course. Having a clear statement about how to get started in the course would meet this standard and ensure that students know what to do next after the Start Here in order to begin your course itself. identifying in what ways the course does not meet the standard, or if the course does meet the standard, in what ways it could be continuously improved, is important. And then offer solutions to help the instructor meet the standard or continuously improve their course. This is what we mean by being constructive. And then we want to be specific. Include explicit information to help the instructor locate where the course does not yet meet the standard, or where the course could be continuously improved, and give an explicit example of what to do to improve. Here's an example. The Start Here button on the course homepage was a great idea for linking students to startup information, as specified in the annotation for Standard 1.1. Instructions make clear how to get started and where to find various course components. When I read the information it contained, I still couldn't exactly tell how to begin the course. It might be very helpful to include a prominent link and directions at the end of the Start Here section about what students should do next to actually begin the first lesson of the course. Having a clear statement about how to get started in the course would meet this standard and ensure that students know just exactly what to do next after reading the Start Here in order to begin the course itself. So you can see, being explicit in providing information that helps the instructor locate where the course does not quite meet the standard, or again, where it could possibly be continuously improved, you want to do this by providing explicit examples directly from the course itself. Next, we want to be sure that we're being measurable. We want to be able to describe how the instructor can improve the course in observable terms. Since the change will be observable, the instructor and the team chair will need to be able to assess whether or not the changes have been made. The recommendation should begin with an action verb that describes a behavior that can be observed and assessed. Here's an example. The Start Here button on the course homepage was a great idea for linking students to startup information, again as specified in the annotation for Standard 1.1. Instructions make clear how to get started and where to find various course components. When I read the information it contained, I still couldn't exactly tell how to begin the course. It might be very helpful to include a prominent link and directions at the end of the Start Here section about what students should do next to actually begin the first lesson of the course. Having a clear statement about how to get started in the course would meet this standard and ensure that students know exactly what to expect after reading a Start Here and in order to begin the course itself. It cannot be overstated the importance of this particular characteristic, the importance of being sensitive. Keep recommendations and comments on a positive note. Do your best to avoid any use of negative language. Instead, use positive phrases like, you might want to consider, in my course it might be helpful if, it appears that, you might indicate, it might be useful to, I had a clear sense of, however I was just a bit confused, about, and I'd like to suggest. This helps treat the instructor with a sense of professionalism and respect for all of the effort that they've put into that course. And remember, we all have our own ideas about how courses ought to be structured. Having the respect of understanding that they have the right to their own opinions is a valuable place to start. We want to help them. We don't want to rule them. We want to treat them as colleagues and give our opinions, and in a way that is professional, that relies on the data, that relies on the research, and provides them with the guidance that they seek. Here's an example. Start Here button on the course homepage was a great idea for linking students to startup information. Again, it's specified in the annotation for Standard 1.1. Instructions are made clear on how to get started and where to find various course components. When I read the information it contained, I still couldn't tell exactly how to begin the course. It might be very helpful to include a prominent link and directions at the end of the Start Here section about what students should do next to actually begin the first lesson of the course, etc. So you see, again, we're trying to guide them and provide them with helpful information. Finally, we want to practice being balanced, or to come at it with a balanced approach. Point out the strengths as well as the weaknesses, but try to always include the strengths. Here's an example. The Start Here button on the course homepage was a great idea for linking students to the startup information as specified in the annotation for Standard 1.1. You see, again, we let them know what they did right. Always beginning, often with a compliment, will get you much further in trying to provide them with information that won't let them or encourage them to take a defensive approach. That's not our objective. Our objective is to truly be helpful. So, applying Quality Matters rubrics is challenging. We all know that. And since you have to review a complex course and make decisions which have serious consequences and certainly impact a colleague, and as well as you have to try to eliminate your own personal bias and provide constructive feedback, all of this tends to lead to very confusing and stressful situations. So it's very important to focus first on the Quality Matters rubric, reading the standards and annotations carefully, and then applying them correctly and consistently. Even if you are familiar with the rubric, it's important to review each standard and its annotation before you begin to gather your evidence from the course itself and then to write up your recommendations. Remember, the annotations provide specific directions to reviewers on what to look for in the course. So, the characteristics when you finally sit down to write your evaluation should be constructive. They should be specific and rely on the course itself, specific examples in the course. They should be measurable. You should be very concrete in exactly what you mean. And by all means be sensitive. Provide support. Tell them what they did right. And then provide helpful suggestions for perhaps just improving their course. And always be balanced. Be equally sensitive about both their strengths as well as their weaknesses. All of this, I promise you, is going to lead to a great, successful, and helpful recommendation. We start with number 1, relying on the standard and the annotations associated with the standards. This provides us with valuable information about the standard and specific directions for the reviewers, as well as important examples. And then we rely heavily on course evidence, specific examples from the course, including location, quotes, details. And finally, it's very important to have the right characteristics when writing up your helpful recommendation. Be constructive, be specific, be measurable, and by all means be sensitive, and always have a balanced approach. All of this will help lead you to a helpful recommendation.